Captain James Hartford stood on the tarmac at Wright Field in Dayton, Ohio, watching the September sky turn amber with the setting sun. The year was 1944, and the war in Europe raged on with a ferocity that consumed entire cities. He adjusted his leather jacket against the autumn chill, his eyes scanning the horizon for the transport plane that was already 3 hours overdue. "Still nothing, sir?" Lieutenant Eddie Morrison approached, carrying 2 steaming cups of coffee. The young officer from Brooklyn had been Hartford's wingman since North Africa, and his nervous energy was palpable. "Nothing yet," Hartford replied, accepting the cup. "But Moscow confirmed they left Fairbanks yesterday morning. Weather over the Rockies might have slowed them down." Morrison shifted his weight from foot to foot. "Is it true, Captain? Did the Russians really send us one of their fighters?" Hartford nodded slowly. "Not just any fighter, Eddie. According to intelligence, it is the Yakovlev Type 3, their best interceptor. Faster than anything the Luftwaffe has at low altitude." The lieutenant whistled low. "And they are just giving it to us?" "Lending," Hartford corrected. "For evaluation purposes. Lend-Lease works both ways, apparently." He sipped the bitter coffee, remembering the briefing from Colonel Ashford 3 days earlier. The colonel had been unusually animated during that meeting, pacing before a map of the Eastern Front peppered with red markers. "Gentlemen," he had said, "what I am about to tell you is classified at the highest level. Our Soviet allies have agreed to send us one of their Yak-3 fighters for technical evaluation. This aircraft has been decimating German fighters over the Eastern Front. Luftwaffe pilots reportedly flee when they see its profile." Hartford had exchanged glances with the other test pilots in the room. They had all heard rumors about Soviet aircraft, whispered stories from bomber crews who had seen Russian fighters during shuttle bombing missions to Ukraine. But hard intelligence was scarce. "The aircraft will arrive with a Soviet pilot and technician," Ashford had continued. "Major Alexei Volkov. He has 73 confirmed kills. 73! The colonel had let that number hang in the air. "He will demonstrate the aircraft, answer technical questions through an interpreter, and remain here for approximately 2 weeks while we conduct our evaluation." Now, as darkness crept across the airfield, Hartford heard it, the deep rumble of radial engines. A Douglas transport materialized from the eastern sky, its navigation lights blinking against the darkening clouds. The C-54 made a textbook approach, touching down smoothly on the main runway. "Here we go," Morrison muttered. Ground crews rushed forward with chocks and ladders as the transport taxied toward the hangar. Hartford straightened his uniform and walked toward the aircraft, followed by Morrison and a cluster of mechanics and engineers who had been waiting all afternoon. The cargo door swung open, and a blast of cold air rolled out from the refrigerated interior. Then a man appeared in the doorway, compact, broad-shouldered, wearing a brown leather flight suit with Soviet insignia. His face was weathered beyond his years, with sharp cheekbones and eyes that seemed to calculate distances by instinct. "Major Volkov?" Hartford called out, extending his hand as the Soviet pilot descended the ladder. "Da, yes." The Russian's grip was firm, his hands calloused. "Captain Hartford?" "That's right. Welcome to Wright Field." Hartford gestured to the others. "This is Lieutenant Morrison, and these are our technical staff." Volkov nodded to each man, his expression neutral but not unfriendly. Behind him came another Soviet officer, older, with graying hair and the careful movements of a veteran mechanic.
"This is Senior Sergeant Pavel Kozlov," Volkov said in heavily accented English. "He knows Yak-3 better than man who built it." Kozlov smiled slightly at this introduction and shook hands around the group. His English was even more limited, consisting mainly of technical terms and brief phrases. "The aircraft is inside?" Hartford asked, gesturing toward the transport's cargo bay. "Yes, disassembled. Wings removed for transport." Volkov looked toward the hangar. "We begin reassembly tomorrow morning?" "Absolutely. We have a secure hangar ready, and our mechanics will assist however needed." As they spoke, a black sedan pulled up, and a short man in civilian clothes emerged, carrying a leather briefcase. "Major Volkov? I am David Greenspan, your interpreter. I will be working with you during your stay."
Volkov studied the interpreter with the same calculating gaze he had given everything else. "You speak Russian?" "My parents came from Minsk," Greenspan replied in Russian. "I grew up speaking both languages." Volkov's expression softened marginally. He responded in rapid Russian, and Greenspan translated. "The Major says he is pleased. He was concerned about misunderstandings regarding technical specifications." Hartford led the group toward the hangar that had been designated for the project. Inside, the space had been cleared and secured, with guards posted at every entrance. Floodlights illuminated the vast interior where the Yak-3 would soon stand. "We will unload tonight," Volkov announced. "Kozlov and I prefer to supervise personally." "Of course," Hartford agreed. "My men will provide whatever assistance you need." Over the next 4 hours, the disassembled fighter emerged from the transport's belly like a puzzle waiting to be solved. The fuselage came first, surprisingly small and compact, painted in Soviet green with red stars on the tail. Then the wings, each carefully wrapped in protective canvas. The propeller blades, the engine cowling, countless smaller components, each logged and tracked. Morrison stood beside Hartford, watching Soviet and American mechanics work side by side, communicating through gestures and shared technical knowledge that transcended language. "She is smaller than I expected," the lieutenant observed. "Lighter, too," Hartford replied. "Look at that construction. Minimalist. Everything designed for one purpose: speed and maneuverability at low altitude." Volkov overheard them and approached. "Yak-3 is light. 2,400 kilograms empty." He paused, calculating. 5,300 pounds, yes? Engine is Klimov VK-105, 1,200 horsepower. "That's a favorable power-to-weight ratio," Hartford noted, impressed despite himself. "Better than Messerschmitt," Volkov said flatly. "Better than Focke-Wulf below 4,000 meters. This is why Germans fear it." He pulled a photograph from his jacket and handed it to Hartford. It showed a Yak-3 in flight, banking hard against a pale sky. Even in the still image, the aircraft conveyed predatory grace. "Beautiful," Hartford admitted. "Beautiful and deadly," Volkov corrected. "Like Falcon." By midnight, the major components were arranged in the hangar, and Kozlov had begun his meticulous inspection, checking every panel, every connection, every surface for damage from the long journey. Volkov stood nearby, smoking a cigarette and answering questions from the American engineers through Greenspan. "How quickly can she roll?" asked one engineer, a thin man with round glasses. Volkov demonstrated with his hands, rolling them rapidly. "Faster than anything I have flown. Perhaps 120 degrees per second at 250 kilometers per hour." The numbers were translated into miles per hour, and the Americans exchanged meaningful glances. That roll rate exceeded anything in their inventory. "What about high-altitude performance?" another engineer asked. Volkov shrugged. "Not designed for high altitude. Wings are small, loading is high. Above 5,000 meters, she struggles. But Eastern Front is low-altitude war. Ground attack, close air support, trench fighting. Yak-3 excels there." Hartford found himself respecting the Russians' directness. There was no boasting, no exaggeration. Just facts delivered with the certainty of a man who had survived 73 aerial combats. "How long to reassemble?" Hartford asked. Kozlov answered through Greenspan. 3 days, maybe 4. We must be careful. Every bolt, every wire must be perfect." "Take whatever time you need," Hartford assured them. "We want her in perfect condition for the test flights." Volkov stubbed out his cigarette and looked directly at Hartford. "You will fly her?" "That's the plan. After you demonstrate her capabilities, I'll take her up for our evaluation." The Soviet pilot studied him for a long moment. "You have combat experience?" 52 missions, P-38s in North Africa and Italy, 12 confirmed kills." Volkov nodded slowly. "Then you understand. Yak-3 is not forgiving. She demands respect, demands skill." He paused. "But for pilot who understands, she is best friend." "I look forward to finding out," Hartford replied. As the night deepened, Hartford arranged quarters for the Soviet visitors in the visiting officers' barracks. Security was tight. 2 MPs were posted outside their doors, ostensibly for protection, but also for surveillance. The Yak-3 represented Soviet technology, and every precaution had been ordered from Washington. Walking back to his own quarters through the quiet base, Morrison caught up with Hartford. "What do you think, sir? Can she really outperform our fighters?" Hartford considered the question. "At low altitude, I think she might. But Morrison, remember, performance is only part of the equation. Our birds have better high-altitude capabilities, better range, better armament in some cases. Different theaters, different requirements." "Still," Morrison persisted, "it would be something if their fighter really is superior in some respects." "It would be educational," Hartford corrected gently. "That's why we are doing this evaluation, to learn. The Soviets are learning from our bombers and transports. We learn from their fighters. That is how allies work, Eddie." But as Hartford lay in his bunk that night, staring at the ceiling, he could not help wondering what it would be like to fly the Yak-3, to feel that power-to-weight ratio translate into acceleration, to throw the aircraft through maneuvers that Volkov claimed were unmatched. The war had taught him to respect enemy engineering. The Focke-Wulf 190 had been a nasty surprise when it first appeared. The Messerschmitt 109 remained formidable in experienced hands. Now here was a Soviet fighter with a reputation that made Luftwaffe pilots think twice. Tomorrow they would begin reassembly. In a few days, he would see Major Volkov put the Yak-3 through its paces. And then, if all went well, he would take the controls himself. Hartford closed his eyes, but sleep was slow to come. His mind was already in the cockpit, his hands on imaginary controls, flying a Red Star fighter across an Ohio sky. The morning sun broke through thin clouds as Hartford arrived at the hangar at 0600 hours. He had barely slept, his mind churning through technical specifications and combat reports about Soviet fighters. The guard snapped to attention as he approached, checking his identification before allowing him through the heavy steel doors. Inside, he found Volkov and Kozlov already at work. The older sergeant was perched on a ladder beside the fuselage, carefully examining a panel joint with a jeweler's precision. Volkov stood nearby with a clipboard, making notes in Cyrillic script. Both men looked as though they had been working for hours. "Good morning, Major," Hartford called out.
"You are up early."
Volkov turned, a slight smile crossing his weathered face. "In Soviet Air Force, we say, 'Early pilot lives longer. Late pilot meets Messerschmitt while still rubbing sleep from eyes.'" Hartford chuckled. "We have a similar expression. The early bird gets the worm." "Bird? Worm?" Volkov looked puzzled until Greenspan arrived and translated. The Russian laughed, a genuine sound that seemed to surprise even himself. "Yes, same idea." Throughout the morning, the hangar filled with activity. American mechanics arrived in shifts, each vetted and cleared for the project. They worked alongside Kozlov, who directed operations with hand signals and occasional words that transcended language barriers. Torque, pressure, clearance, alignment. The universal vocabulary of aviation. The wings were reattached first, a delicate operation requiring precise alignment. Hartford watched, fascinated by the Yak's construction. Unlike American fighters with their heavy frames and abundant rivets, the Soviet aircraft seemed almost delicate, its wooden components and fabric-covered sections speaking to different manufacturing philosophies born of different resources. "Plywood and canvas," observed Major Robert Chen, the head engineer assigned to the evaluation. He had arrived from Washington the previous evening. "Interesting approach." "Not weakness," Volkov said, overhearing. He had remarkably sharp ears. "Advantage. Easy to repair in field. Bullet holes? Patch with fabric. Damaged spar? Replace wooden section. In Russia, we have forests, not aluminum factories." Chen nodded thoughtfully. "Makes sense. Different industrial base, different solutions." "And the weight," Volkov continued, warming to the subject. "Every kilogram matters. Aluminum is strong but heavy. Plywood laminate, treated correctly, is strong enough and much lighter. Fabric covering on control surfaces reduces weight further. Result? Yak-3 weighs less than any comparable fighter." Hartford ran his hand along the wing's leading edge. The workmanship was excellent, the surface smooth despite the mixed materials. What about battle damage? Isn't wood more vulnerable? Volkov shrugged. Cannon shell destroys aluminum or wood equally. But machine gun fire? Wood sometimes better. Bullet passes through, leaves clean hole. Aluminum tears, cracks, spreads damage. He pulled another photograph from his seemingly endless supply. This one showed a Yak-3 with multiple bullet holes, still flying. This aircraft flew home after combat with Focke-Wulf. 15 holes. Pilot landed safely. We patched holes. Aircraft flew again next day. By noon, the fuselage and wings were united, and the fighter was beginning to take shape. Workers carefully installed the Klimov engine, a 12-cylinder, liquid-cooled power plant that Kozlov treated with almost religious reverence. He personally checked every connection, every hose, every wire. That engine is his baby, Morrison observed quietly to Hartford. Look at how he handles it, Hartford replied. That is a man who understands that engine failures at 3,000 feet are fatal. Greenspan translated a rapid exchange between Volkov and Kozlov. The sergeant says the engine was rebuilt in Moscow specifically for this journey. 0 hours since overhaul. Every component inspected and certified by the factory. Good, Chen said, making notes. We'll want to run ground tests for at least 6 hours before any flight. Through Greenspan, Volkov agreed. Kozlov will not allow flight until he is satisfied. He is more careful than my mother. The afternoon brought unexpected visitors. Colonel Ashford arrived with 2 men in civilian suits who had intelligence written all over them, despite their bland appearances. They observed from a distance, taking photographs and making notes, asking occasional questions through Ashford. Who are they? Morrison whispered. ONI, probably, Hartford replied, referring to the Office of Naval Intelligence. Or maybe Army Intelligence. Everyone wants a piece of this. Volkov noticed the observers, but showed no reaction beyond a slight tightening around his eyes. He continued working, answering technical questions from the American engineers with the same patient directness he had shown the previous night. By 1700 hours, the Yak-3 stood complete on its landing gear, looking purposeful and deadly despite being static. The Soviet green paint seemed to absorb the hangar's light, making the red stars on the fuselage and wings appear almost luminous. Tomorrow we begin engine tests, Kozlov announced through Greenspan. Then control surface checks. Then taxi tests. Then, if all is perfect, flight demonstration. How long? Ashford asked. Kozlov considered. 3 days, perhaps 4. One of the civilian observers spoke for the first time. That seems excessive for a simple flight demonstration. Volkov turned slowly to face the man, his expression hardening. Simple? You think flight test is simple? In Soviet Air Force, we have expression. Rushed pilot makes good fertilizer. We will test when aircraft is ready, not before. An uncomfortable silence fell over the hangar. Ashford cleared his throat. Major Volkov is quite right. We proceed according to proper protocol. Safety first. The civilian looked ready to argue, but subsided under Ashford's glare. That evening, Hartford invited Volkov and Kozlov to the officers' club for dinner. The Russian accepted, though he insisted Kozlov come along. He is not just mechanic, Volkov explained. He is master sergeant, veteran. He has earned respect. The officers' club was half empty, most personnel being at dinner in the main mess hall. Hartford secured a quiet corner table where they could talk without being overheard. Morrison joined them, along with Chen and Greenspan, over roasted chicken and potatoes, plain fare by officers' club standards, but apparently luxurious by Soviet ones. Volkov gradually relaxed. He asked questions about American aircraft, comparing performance characteristics with obvious professional interest. Your P-51 Mustang, he said, very impressive at high altitude, long range. We have seen them on shuttle missions to Poltava. Hartford nodded. Different mission profile than the Yak-3. The Mustang is designed to escort bombers deep into Germany. high altitude, long endurance. Yes, each tool for its purpose, Volkov gestured with his fork. Yak-3 is sword for close combat. Mustang is spear for long reach. Both needed. How does the Yak-3 compare to the earlier Yak models? Chen asked, his engineer's mind seeking technical details. Volkov considered his response carefully. Yak-1 was good start. Yak-7 was improved. Yak-9 is excellent for many purposes. But Yak-3? He paused. Yak-3 is what happens when you take everything learned and make it lighter, faster, more responsive. Alexander Yakovlev himself said it is perfect machine for Eastern Front. You have met Yakovlev? Morrison asked, impressed. Once, in Moscow. He came to our airfield to observe aircraft in combat conditions. Asked many questions. Very interested in pilot opinions. Volkov smiled at the memory. He is designer who listens. Kozlov spoke at length in Russian, and Greenspan translated. The sergeant says the Yak-3 incorporates suggestions from dozens of frontline pilots. Lower cockpit canopy for better visibility. Modified engine cowling for improved cooling. Strengthened landing gear for rough field operations. Every change came from combat experience. That is excellent design methodology, Chen acknowledged. Learn from the users. As dinner progressed, Volkov shared stories from the Eastern Front, his voice matter-of-fact even when describing harrowing encounters. He spoke of winter operations at 40 degrees below zero, where engines had to be heated with fires before starting. Of aerial battles over Stalingrad, where dozens of aircraft filled the sky. Of the grinding, brutal nature of the air war in the East. How many hours do you have? Hartford asked. In combat? Over 800. Total flight time? Perhaps 1,200 hours. Morrison's eyes widened. 800 combat hours? Eastern Front is different from your war, Volkov explained. We fly many short missions, sometimes 4 or 5 sorties per day. Escort ground attack planes, protect our troops, engage enemy fighters. No long flights deep into enemy territory. Everything happens close to front lines. That must be exhausting, Hartford said. Yes, but necessary. Germans are good fighters. Experienced, well-trained. We must be better, must fly more, must never give them rest. Volkov's expression hardened. They came to our country, destroyed our cities, killed our people. We will drive them back to Berlin, no matter the cost. The intensity in his voice silenced the table. Here was a man who had seen his homeland invaded, who fought not for abstractions, but for survival. Hartford felt a new respect for their Soviet ally. How did you get into aviation? Morrison asked, breaking the heavy silence. Volkov's expression softened. My father was aircraft mechanic in civil aviation before war. He took me to airfield as boy. I watched planes take off and land, dreamed of flying. When I was 18, I joined flying club, learned on old biplanes. Then war came, and flying club became military training center. He shrugged. War makes pilots quickly. Your first combat? Hartford asked. Summer of 1941, 3 weeks after Germany invaded. I had 40 hours of flight training, maybe 15 hours solo. They gave me Yak-1 with worn engine and told me to defend Kiev. Volkov laughed bitterly. First mission, I was so frightened I could barely hold control stick. Saw Messerschmitt 109 and nearly fainted. But training took over. I dove, he followed. I turned inside him, got on his tail, and fired. He went down. First combat, and you got a kill? Morrison was incredulous. Luck. Pure luck. He was probably new pilot too. Made mistake. Volkov paused. Next mission, I was less lucky. Took 20mm cannon round through left wing barely made it back. Learned important lesson. Luck runs out. Skill is what keeps you alive. Kozlov added something in Russian, and Greenspan translated with a smile. The sergeant says Major Volkov is too modest. His first victory was not luck. It was instinct. Natural pilot. Kozlov is biased, Volkov protested. He has been keeping my aircraft flying for 3 years. Of course he thinks I am a good pilot. Otherwise, he wasted 3 years on dead man. They all laughed, the tension easing. As the evening wore on, Hartford found himself genuinely liking the Soviet pilot. Volkov was direct, professional, and displayed a dry humor that transcended the language barrier. He was also, Hartford recognized, extremely intelligent. Every question about American aircraft and tactics was carefully calculated to extract maximum information while revealing minimum details about Soviet operations. Tomorrow, Volkov said as they prepared to leave, you will see Yak-3 with engine running. Day after, taxi tests. Then, demonstration flight. I promise you, Captain Hartford, it will be worth the wait. I believe you, Major. Walking back through the darkness, Morrison voiced what Hartford was thinking. He is not what I expected, sir. I thought Soviet pilots would be more, more propaganda-like. He is just a professional. That is exactly what he is, Hartford agreed. A professional who has survived 3 years of the most brutal air combat in history. We should learn everything we can from him. The third day dawned clear and cool, perfect weather for engine testing. Hartford arrived at the hangar to find it already buzzing with activity. Kozlov had the engine cowling open and was making final adjustments, while Volkov conducted a meticulous walk-around inspection of the aircraft. Good morning, Hartford called out. Ready for the engine run? Volkov looked up from examining the propeller blades. Almost. Kozlov wants to check fuel mixture one more time. He is perfectionist. That is a good quality in a mechanic. Essential quality, Volkov corrected. Sloppy mechanic kills pilot as surely as enemy bullet. By 0800 hours, everything was ready. Fire extinguishers were positioned around the aircraft. Medical personnel stood by. Chen and his team had instrumentation set up to record engine performance. The hangar doors were opened wide to allow for ventilation and a clear view of the airfield beyond. Volkov climbed into the cockpit while Kozlov stood by the propeller. The Soviet pilot's hands moved through the pre-start checklist with practiced efficiency, each movement deliberate and precise. He called out in Russian and Kozlov responded, the two men working through a ritual refined by countless repetitions. Contact! Volkov shouted. Kozlov pulled the propeller through several times, priming the engine. Then he stepped back and signaled ready. Volkov engaged the starter. The Klimov engine coughed once, twice, then caught with a roar that filled the hangar. Blue smoke billowed from the exhaust stacks as the 12 cylinders came to life. The propeller spun into an invisible disc, its passage creating a wind that rippled through the hangar. Hartford watched the instruments being monitored by Chen's team. Oil pressure climbed steadily. Temperature gauges showed the engine warming properly. The rhythmic thunder settled into a smooth, powerful rumble. Volkov let the engine warm for 10 minutes, occasionally adjusting the throttle and checking various gauges. Then he began to increase power, running through different RPM settings while Kozlov listened to the engine with the concentration of a maestro evaluating an orchestra. At full power, the Yak-3 strained against its wheel chocks, the entire airframe vibrating with barely contained energy. The noise was tremendous, a visceral reminder of the 1,200 horses trying to pull the fighter skyward. After 30 minutes of testing, Volkov throttled back and shut down the engine. The silence that followed seemed almost oppressive. He climbed down from the cockpit, and Kozlov immediately began checking for leaks, loose connections, any sign of problems. Well? Hartford asked. Perfect, Volkov replied, removing his leather flying helmet. Engine is strong. No unusual vibrations. No temperature problems. Tomorrow, we taxi. Chen approached with his clipboard full of data. Impressive power plant. Very smooth operation. The cooling system is particularly efficient. Must be, Volkov explained. Klimov runs hot. Without proper cooling, engine fails quickly. Russians are good at designing for harsh conditions. Our engines must work at -40 and +40 both. The rest of the day was spent in detailed inspections. Every panel was examined, every system checked and rechecked. The American engineers asked endless questions about the aircraft systems, and Volkov answered with remarkable patience, clearly proud of his aircraft. The control system is interesting, noted one engineer, examining the aileron linkages. Very simple, very direct, minimal mechanical advantage. That is the point, Volkov said. Direct connection between pilot and control surfaces. You feel the aircraft. It becomes part of you. He demonstrated by moving the stick, showing how the ailerons responded immediately. No sluggishness, no delay. Think and do become same thing. Must require significant physical strength, the engineer observed. Yes, at high speed controls are heavy, but heavy controls give feedback. You feel the air, feel the speed. Light controls can be deceptive. Volkov smiled. Besides, combat makes you strong. After 300 fights, you have good muscles. That evening, Hartford found Volkov alone in the hangar, sitting on a workbench and staring at the Yak-3. The fighter looked almost predatory in the dim light, its sharp lines suggesting coiled violence. "May I join you?" Hartford asked. "Please," Volkov gestured to the bench. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, two pilots contemplating a machine that represented both terrible beauty and deadly purpose. "You love it," Hartford said. It was not a question. "Love?" Volkov considered the word. "Perhaps. It has kept me alive, killed my enemies, brought me home when it should not have been possible." He paused. "But love suggests affection. What I feel is more like respect, trust, the understanding between partners who depend on each other." "I understand that," Hartford said. "My P-38. We went through hell together over Tunisia. I trusted that aircraft with my life every day." "Then you know." Volkov pulled out a cigarette, offered one to Hartford, who declined. "This Yak-3, she is special. Built in Moscow at Factory Number 1. Selected for quality. Everything perfect. Given to me because I had survived long enough to deserve perfect machine." He lit the cigarette. 50 pilots flew this type from my regiment. I am one of 7 still alive." The statistic hung in the air like smoke. "The Eastern Front," Hartford said quietly. "We hear stories, but—" "Stories cannot capture it," Volkov interrupted. "Imagine sky filled with aircraft, 30, 40, 50 machines all trying to kill each other. Tracers everywhere like deadly fireworks. Aircraft falling, burning, exploding, all happening in minutes. Then, silence. You are alive, but half your squadron is gone. Next day, you fly again. How do you keep doing it?" Volkov exhaled slowly. "Because someone must. Because Germans will not stop themselves. Because every day I fly, some German bomber does not reach our troops. Some enemy fighter does not kill my friends." He looked directly at Hartford. "And because I am good at it. War is a terrible thing, but if you must fight, better to be excellent fighter than poor one." Hartford nodded, understanding the harsh logic. "Tomorrow," Volkov continued, "I will taxi this aircraft. Day after, I will fly her for your evaluation. You will see what she can do. Then you will fly her yourself. Yes?" "That is the plan." "Good. You are experienced combat pilot. You will understand her properly. Not just numbers on paper, but what she feels like when Messerschmitt is on your tail and you must outturn him or die." "I look forward to it," Hartford said. "And I admit, I am nervous about it too." Volkov smiled. Nervous is good. Overconfident pilot makes mistakes. Nervous pilot stays alert, respects the machine, lives longer. He stubbed out his cigarette. I will teach you her secrets. How to use that power-to-weight ratio. How to turn inside anything. How to make Germans run away. The fourth day brought the taxi tests. With the entire evaluation team watching, Volkov started the engine and began slowly moving the Yak-3 around the tarmac. He tested the brakes, the steering, the ground handling characteristics. The fighter was responsive and nimble even on the ground, its narrow landing gear giving it a purposeful stance. Morrison stood beside Hartford, shielding his eyes from the morning sun. She looks fast even sitting still. That is because she is fast, Hartford replied. Wait until you see her in the air. After an hour of taxi tests, including several high-speed runs that lifted the tailwheel off the ground, Volkov shut down and climbed out.
His expression was satisfied.
Tomorrow, he announced. Tomorrow, we fly. That night, Hartford barely slept. His mind raced through everything he had learned about the Yak-3, imagining what the flight demonstration would reveal. He reviewed his notes on performance specifications, compared them mentally to the P-38 and P-51, tried to predict how the Soviet fighter would handle. The fifth day arrived with scattered clouds and light winds, good flying weather. By 0700 hours, the hangar was crowded with personnel. Colonel Ashford had brought more observers from Washington, including several high-ranking officers and more civilians with intelligence credentials. Everyone wanted to see the legendary Soviet fighter in action. Volkov appeared wearing a full flight suit, parachute already strapped on. His face showed the calm focus of a man preparing for combat, though this was merely a demonstration. Kozlov conducted a final pre-flight inspection, checking every surface, every connection, every detail. Captain Hartford, Volkov called out. Please come. Hartford approached and Volkov gestured to the cockpit. I will explain controls before flight. This way you understand what you see. For the next 20 minutes, Volkov provided a detailed tour of the cockpit. It was cramped compared to American fighters, everything positioned for maximum efficiency rather than comfort. The instruments were labeled in Cyrillic, but their functions were universal. Airspeed, altitude, engine temperature, fuel. Stick and rudder, Volkov demonstrated. Very sensitive. Small movements create large effects. This is advantage and disadvantage. Advantage, quick response. Disadvantage, easy to over-control. He pointed to the throttle. Engine responds quickly. Be smooth. Sudden movements waste energy and stress engine. Armament? Hartford asked, noting the gun ports in the nose. One 20mm cannon firing through propeller hub.
Two 12.7mm machine guns synchronized to fire through propeller arc.
Volkov's expression hardened. Enough to destroy any German fighter. I know this personally. With the briefing complete, Volkov climbed in and strapped himself down. Kozlov helped secure the canopy, then stepped back. The ritual of engine start played out again, and soon the Klimov was roaring its readiness. Ground crew pulled the wheel chocks. Volkov raised his hand in signal, then released the brakes. The Yak-3 rolled forward, turned toward the runway, and taxied out with surprising grace. Hartford and the others moved to the observation area beside the runway. Chen had his team ready with stopwatches and cameras, prepared to document everything. At the runway threshold, Volkov stopped and ran through his final checks. Then the engine note changed, rising to a howl as he advanced the throttle to full power. The Yak-3 leaped forward, accelerating with startling rapidity. The tail came up almost immediately. Within seconds that seemed impossibly brief, the main gear lifted off, and the fighter was airborne. Good God, Morrison breathed. Did you see that takeoff roll? Could not have been more than 800 feet, Chen said, checking his notes. Possibly less. The Yak-3 climbed steeply, Volkov keeping the nose pointed skyward until he reached about 3,000 feet. Then he leveled off and began his demonstration. The Yak-3 carved through the Ohio sky like a blade, its Soviet green paint contrasting sharply against the scattered clouds. Hartford watched through binoculars as Volkov put the fighter through its paces, each maneuver crisp and precise. First came a series of rolls. The aircraft rotated around its longitudinal axis with breathtaking speed, completing a full 360-degree rotation in barely more than a second. Then another. And another. 6 rolls in rapid succession, the fighter remaining perfectly on axis throughout.
Incredible roll rate, Chen muttered, scribbling notes furiously. Far exceeds anything we have.
Next, Volkov demonstrated the turn performance. He banked hard left, pulling the Yak-3 through a tight circle that seemed to defy physics. Even from the ground, Hartford could hear the engine screaming as Volkov maintained power through the turn. The fighter carved a perfect arc in the sky, losing minimal altitude. Tight turn radius, Morrison observed. Very tight. Volkov leveled out, then executed a series of vertical maneuvers, a loop, an Immelman turn, a split S that sent the Yak-3 diving toward the Earth before pulling out smoothly at low altitude. Each maneuver flowed into the next with balletic grace, demonstrating not just the aircraft's capabilities, but Volkov's mastery of them. "He is showing off," Ashford said, but there was admiration in his voice. "He is showing us what the aircraft can do in combat," Hartford corrected. "Every one of those maneuvers has a tactical purpose." For 20 minutes, Volkov continued the demonstration. High-speed passes over the runway, showing the Yak's acceleration. Steep climbs demonstrating the excellent power-to-weight ratio. Sudden deceleration and tight turns simulating defensive maneuvers against an attacking fighter. Then came the finale. Volkov took the Yak-3 down to barely 200 feet above the runway and flew past at maximum speed. The engine howl was tremendous, the aircraft a green blur. He pulled up sharply, executed a perfect chandelle that combined climb with turn, then rolled inverted at the top and pulled through into a diving attack run, finishing with a low-level aileron roll that brought gasps from the observers. "That man," Chen said quietly, "is either crazy or the best pilot I have ever seen." "Both, probably," Hartford replied. Volkov brought the Yak-3 around for landing. His approach was steep and fast, the Soviet technique different from American procedures. The fighter touched down firmly, rolled briefly, then stopped with remarkable quickness. As the engine shut down and silence returned, the observation area erupted in applause. Even the intelligence officers, trained to maintain professional detachment, were clapping. Volkov climbed out, removed his helmet, and walked over to the group. His face showed no emotion beyond professional satisfaction. "Aircraft performs to specifications," he announced simply. "That was extraordinary," Ashford said. "Truly extraordinary." Volkov shrugged. "That was demonstration. In combat, everything happens faster, with less margin for error. But yes, Yak-3 is extraordinary aircraft." Hartford approached. "I would like to fly her tomorrow, if that is acceptable." Volkov studied him for a long moment. "You have questions first, yes? About handling characteristics?" "Many questions." "Good. We will talk tonight. I will tell you everything you need to know." Volkov paused. "But I warn you, Yak-3 is not forgiving. She demands respect and skill. If you are sloppy, she will punish you." "I understand." That evening, Hartford and Volkov sat in the briefing room with detailed aircraft diagrams spread across the table. For 3 hours, the Soviet pilot shared his knowledge, explaining the Yak's quirks and characteristics, its strengths and weaknesses. "Most important thing," Volkov emphasized, "is smooth control. Do not jerk stick. Do not make sudden movements. Be firm, but smooth. Aircraft responds quickly. You must think ahead." "What about stalls?" Hartford asked. "Stall behavior is honest. You will feel buffeting in stick. When she stalls, nose drops straight down. Recover with forward stick and power. Do not try to turn during stall recovery, or you will spin." Spin characteristics? Volkov's expression became serious. Avoid spins. Recovery is possible, but difficult. If you spin, immediately, throttle idle, opposite rudder to rotation, stick forward. When rotation stops, neutralize rudder and pull out of dive, but better, do not spin. They discussed engine management, fuel consumption, landing characteristics, emergency procedures. Volkov was thorough and patient, answering every question with the detail born of hard-won experience. One more thing, Volkov said as the session ended. When you fly her, do not try to duplicate my demonstration. Learn aircraft first. Feel how she responds. Build trust between you and machine. Speed comes with understanding. Sound advice, Hartford agreed. It is advice that kept me alive. Now it may keep you alive, too. The next morning arrived with clear skies and calm winds. Hartford went through his pre-flight routine with extra care, checking every surface, every control, every system. Kozlov watched his inspection with approval, occasionally pointing out details specific to the Yak-3. Engine temperature must stay in green zone, Kozlov explained through Greenspan. Too hot? You damage engine quickly. Watch gauge constantly. Hartford climbed into the cockpit. It felt strange after years in American fighters. Everything slightly different, slightly foreign. The seat was harder, the visibility different. The instrument layout unfamiliar despite Volkov's briefing. But the essential elements were universal. Stick, rudder, throttle, instruments. Volkov stood on the wing, conducting a final check. Remember, smooth control. Respect the aircraft. Let her teach you. He secured the canopy and stepped down. Hartford ran through the start checklist, his hands moving automatically despite the Cyrillic labels. The Klimov caught on the second try, settling into its characteristic rumble. He let it warm, checking gauges, feeling the vibration through the airframe. Ground crew cleared the chocks. Hartford released the brakes and began taxiing. The Yak-3 felt alive beneath him, eager, responsive. The narrow landing gear made ground handling different from American fighters, requiring more attention to balance. At the runway threshold, Hartford performed his final checks. Everything showed green. He advanced the throttle smoothly, and the Klimov responded with a surge of power that pressed him back into the seat. The acceleration was astonishing, far beyond what he was accustomed to. Within seconds, the tail lifted. A moment later, the main gear broke free from Earth, and he was flying. The Yak-3 climbed eagerly, and Hartford felt the raw power of the Klimov engine translating into altitude. Every control input produced immediate response. Volkov had been right. This was an aircraft that demanded constant attention, that rewarded skill and punished carelessness. At 5,000 feet, Hartford leveled off and began exploring the fighter's characteristics. He started with gentle turns, feeling how the ailerons responded, how much rudder was needed to coordinate. The controls were indeed heavy at speed, requiring firm pressure, but the feedback was exceptional. He could feel the air flowing over the wings, sense the aircraft's attitude through the stick. He tried a steeper turn, pulling harder. The Yak-3 responded instantly, banking sharply. Hartford added power and felt the fighter accelerate through the turn, maintaining altitude effortlessly. The turn radius was incredibly tight. In combat, this would be devastating. Emboldened, he attempted a roll. A gentle forward pressure, stick hard to the right. The horizon spun with shocking speed. 1 rotation. 2. He stopped at 3, amazed at the roll rate. In a turning fight, this agility would be unmatched. For 30 minutes, Hartford explored the envelope. Climbs, dives, turns, rolls. Each maneuver revealed new aspects of the Yak's character. The aircraft was honest, direct, demanding but fair. It never surprised him with unexpected behavior, never did anything he did not command. He understood now why Volkov spoke of the Yak-3 with such respect. This was not merely a machine, but a weapon system optimized for one purpose: close-range air combat. Every design choice served that goal. The lightweight, the powerful engine, the responsive controls, the tight turn radius, all combined to create a fighter that could dominate in a knife fight. Hartford made one high-speed pass over the runway, experiencing the exhilaration of the Klimov at full power, then set up for landing. Following Volkov's instructions, he kept his approach speed higher than he would in American fighters, maintaining power until the last moment. The Yak-3 settled onto the runway firmly but controllably. He braked carefully, mindful of the narrow gear, and taxied back to the hangar. As the engine shut down, Hartford sat for a moment in the sudden silence, processing what he had just experienced. Then he climbed out to find Volkov, Morrison, Chen, and half the base waiting. "Well?" Volkov asked, a slight smile on his weathered face. Hartford removed his helmet slowly. "She is magnificent. Absolutely magnificent. The handling, the power, the responsiveness, everything you said was true." Volkov's smile widened. "You understand now." "I understand why the Luftwaffe fears this aircraft." Over the following days, Hartford flew the Yak-3 6 more times, each flight revealing new details. Chen's team collected mountains of data: performance figures, handling characteristics, structural analysis, engine specifications. Every aspect of the Soviet fighter was documented and evaluated. The final report, compiled by Chen and reviewed by Hartford, was laudatory. The Yak-3 excelled at low-altitude combat, with superior turn performance and excellent acceleration below 15,000 feet. Its weaknesses, limited high-altitude capability and short range, were acknowledged but understood as design choices appropriate for the Eastern Front.
Different war, different requirements, Hartford told Ashford during the final briefing.
Our fighters are designed for bomber escort at high altitude over long distances. The Yak-3 is designed for close air support and defensive operations. Both approaches are valid for their respective theaters. On the final evening before Volkov and Kozlov's departure, Hartford hosted a farewell dinner. The two Soviets had spent 2 weeks at Wright Field, sharing their knowledge freely, answering endless questions with patience and professionalism. "This has been valuable exchange," Volkov said, raising his glass. "You have learned about our aircraft. We have learned about your methods, your testing procedures. This makes both nations stronger against common enemy." "To Allied cooperation," Hartford replied, and they drank. Later, as they walked toward the hangar where the Yak-3 was being prepared for its return journey, Volkov spoke quietly. "You are good pilot, Captain Hartford. In different circumstances, I think we could have been friends." "We are friends," Hartford said. "The war does not change that." Volkov smiled. "Perhaps. When war is over, maybe you visit Soviet Union. I will show you where I learned to fly. We will drink vodka and tell lies about our combat victories." "I would like that." They stood before the Yak-3, both men regarding the aircraft with the affection of those who understood what it represented. Not just engineering excellence, but the hopes and sacrifices of a nation fighting for survival. "She is a beautiful fighter," Hartford said. "You should be proud." "I am proud of designers who built her, proud of workers who manufactured her, proud of mechanics like Kozlov who keep her flying." Volkov paused. "And yes, proud to fly her." The next morning, Hartford watched as the Yak-3 was carefully disassembled and loaded back into the transport. Volkov and Kozlov supervised every step, ensuring their precious fighter would survive the journey home. As the transport's engine started, Volkov shook Hartford's hand one final time. "Fly safe, Captain. Survive the war. Perhaps we meet again in better times." "Fly safe yourself, Major. Give the Luftwaffe hell." Volkov grinned. "Always." The transport taxied away, carrying the Yak-3 and its crew back toward Alaska, then across the Bering Strait to the Soviet Union. Hartford watched until it disappeared into the eastern sky. Morrison approached. "Think we will see him again, sir?" "I hope so," Hartford replied. "The world needs more pilots like Volkov. Skilled, professional, dedicated. When the war ends, men like him will be valuable." "What happens to the report?" Morrison asked. "It goes to Washington. The data will be analyzed, compared with our own fighters, possibly influence future designs. But more importantly, it represents something bigger than performance specifications." Hartford turned to face his wingman. "It represents Allied cooperation, shared knowledge, mutual respect. That might be more valuable than any technical data." 3 months later, Hartford received a letter through military channels. It was brief, written in careful English. "Captain Hartford, I am back at front. Yak-3 flies well. Shot down 2 Focke-Wulfs yesterday. Thank you for respecting our aircraft. When war ends, do not forget invitation. Your friend, Alexei Volkov, Major, Soviet Air Force." Hartford folded the letter carefully and placed it in his footlocker. The war continued, but for 2 weeks in September 1944, 2 pilots from different worlds had met, shared their knowledge, and discovered that professionalism and mutual respect transcended politics and nationality. The Yak-3 had been more than a fighter to evaluate. It had been a bridge between allies, a symbol of shared purpose, and a reminder that even in war, there were moments of understanding and friendship. Hartford never saw Volkov again. The Soviet pilot survived the war with 91 confirmed victories, but died in a training accident in 1947. Hartford learned of his death through official channels and felt genuine grief for a friend he had known for only 2 weeks, but would remember forever. The experience at Wright Field influenced Hartford's thinking for the rest of his career. After the war, he advocated for international cooperation in aviation, for shared knowledge and mutual respect between former adversaries. He often told the story of the Yak-3 evaluation, emphasizing not just the technical achievements, but the human connections formed. The Red Star fighter had taught him more than aerodynamics and performance characteristics. It had taught him that excellence knew no borders, that professionalism transcended nationality, and that even enemies could recognize and respect each other's achievements. In the end, that might have been the most valuable lesson of all. The end.